मास्क उतारो जी में आप सबका स्वागत है. Yes, I'm interviewing one and only Robert Spencer. Yes, Mr. Robert Spencer. He is, he's so popular in India, especially with the nationalists. They admire him. They like his forthright and blunt attitude. And they've been asking me, pestering me to interview him, and he's taken out time for me. Hi, Robert.
Hello, thank you for having me on.
It's an honor for me, Robert, that you took out time for me. Yeah. So, Robert, your voice is cracking, Robert.
I'm sorry, I don't know what to do. The connection is the only connection I have. I don't know how to improve it.
Okay, so we'll do it. We'll do something about it. Okay. So, I would like to tell people who don't know about Robert Spencer. Would like to tell him that he's director of Jihad Watch, author of 23 books, many bestsellers. The Truth About Muhammad, The History of Jihad, Did Muhammad Exist, The Critical Quran, etc., etc., etc. He's written 23 books. So, Robert, let's talk about your pinned tweet, which you've pinned it on Twitter. It's about Islamophobia. Like the moment you talk about violation of human rights in Muslim community, anything related to Islam, they label you or us with this word Islamophobic and Islamophobia. Would you like to tell us something about it?
Yes, you're quite right. Islamophobia actually is a word that was devised in order to serve this purpose, to intimidate people into thinking they better not speak up about the atrocities committed in jihads and the atrocities committed by people who adhere to Sharia Islamic law, because they're afraid. If they speak up, they'll be called racist, they'll be called bigoted, they'll be called Islamophobic, and this can be very difficult for them, both personally and professionally. And so many people are silent as a result, and that's exactly why the term is used. This is the whole purpose of it, to silence critics of jihad violence and Sharia oppression.
Okay. So now I would like to ask you another question. It's about CAIR, that is Council on American Islamic Relations. They are discussing everything. They have an opinion on everything Indian, everything Hindu, everything, they're related to Dalit. But especially I want to know is that what has united Black lives with CAIR?
I'm sorry, that last bit was a bit broken up. Could you please repeat the last part of the question? I didn't hear it.
I'm saying what has united Black lives with CAIR?
Oh, well, Black Lives Matter, is that the group you mean?
Yeah, but
yes.
How is CAIR related to it?
They are close friends and allies because they share a common perspective, and that is that the United States and really many other countries besides the United States as well are inherently oppressive and racist. And ultimately CAIR, the CAIR, Council on American Islamic Relations, wants to replace the government of the United States, the government of India, the government of all other countries with Islamic governments. They were created by people who were linked to Hamas, the terror group in Israel, and the Muslim Brotherhood, which is dedicated to imposing Sharia around the world. And that's what they want to do. Black Lives Matter has allied with pro-Sharia forces. They sent a group a few years ago to Gaza to meet with Palestinian jihadis and to learn their techniques. And they brought those same techniques to the United States during the riots in 2020. So Black Lives Matter also wants to bring down the system. They don't necessarily want to impose a Sharia state, but they also want an authoritarian government that would crush all dissent. And so they see CAIR, the Council on American Islamic Relations, as an ally.
Okay. And I've noticed another thing, which I was reading about it, that they have requested a special US convoy to combat Islamophobia in India and talk about that there can be a genocide of Muslims in India. Why are they doing this?
The representative from Minnesota in the United States Congress, Ilhan Omar, is an observant Muslim who wears the hijab and adheres to Sharia. And she introduced this bill to create a department, an office within the State Department, that is, that would monitor Islamophobia worldwide, and thus would bring pressure upon governments, notably the government of India, but others as well, in order to ensure that they treat Muslims well. Now, all this is based on false pretenses. The idea that Muslims are discriminated against in these various countries, including India. These things are not true, but nonetheless, Ilhan Omar capitalizes upon the general ignorance of the American public regarding the situation in countries such as India, and uses it in order to further her own ends. And here again, it's the same thing. The whole Islamophobia imperative is designed to intimidate into silence the foes of jihad. And if the United States State Department is pressuring other governments on this basis, that will only inhibit efforts to contain jihad activity worldwide.
Okay. Now, I want to know something more about Ilhan Omar.
Ilhan Omar is a Somali immigrant, a refugee from Somalia, where her family left in the 1990s because of the war there. And she came to the United States and quickly became, as she grew into adulthood, a rising star within the Democrat Party, because she holds to the far left views that the Democrats increasingly espouse. And the Democrats want to highlight immigrants, people who are Black, women, and Muslims, because they are a party of special favors to special groups, and the idea of the atomization of society in favor of rival groups that will vie for power and influence. This is the vision of society that the Democrats have. So they saw Ilhan Omar as someone who could just go as far as possible, as far as they were concerned, because she was triply a member of these protected victim groups, females, Blacks, and Muslims. And consequently, they have made her a congresswoman, and she's likely to become a senator in the future. If she could run for president, she can't run for president because she is not a natural born citizen of the United States. But if she had been born here, she would certainly be a presidential candidate in the future.
Scary, scary. Another thing I want to know, this is about Washington Post and New York Times. What's their agenda?
They have the same agenda as the left internationally. They want to destroy the societies in which they are operating and replace them with authoritarian leftist regimes. They are indefatigable cheerleaders for the left's agenda. They constantly smear and defame people who oppose that agenda and whitewash people who support that agenda, excusing whatever they do because they're on the right side. And so if you wanted to identify two of the most important reasons why the United States is in such crisis today and why there's so much disunity, it would be the New York Times and the Washington Post.
And I've noticed another thing in India, especially, people have lost that, the trust factor is lost where Washington Post and New York Times is concerned. And same goes for Americans also, Indian Americans. Earlier, they used to really, every time I used to question them about something, or we used to debate on a particular subject, especially all these Islamophobia thing, they used to give me examples from, the articles from Washington Post and New York Times. So do they realize, I've heard, is it true that they're going through some financial crisis also?
Yes, the New York Times and Washington Post, like actually all of the leftist media outlets, are losing subscribers, losing readers, and thus suffering financially. We can only hope that they'll go out of business altogether. The pursuit of their leftist agenda has lost them a considerable amount of their previous audience. As you noted, it used to be that the New York Times and the Washington Post were thought of as news sources, as simply neutral news outlets. But fewer and fewer people believe that nowadays, with very good reason. And so we can only hope that their last days are in sight.
So now let's talk about the President of America and the Vice President. Your views on President Biden?
Well, it's interesting that yesterday Barack Obama visited the White House and introduced Vice President Biden. And then he immediately said that he was joking, but it's noteworthy that Biden has frequently said in press conferences, I have been told, he's holding a paper and he says, I have been told that I must call upon this reporter next. Well, who told him? He never has said who's writing out his instructions, but many times he's also said, I'm going to get in trouble if I answer any more questions. And so here again, who will he get in trouble with? He's the president. There's not supposed to be another authority running the president, but there clearly is. Obviously, his many verbal slip-ups indicate that he's not in control of his faculties. He's 79 years old. He's in the grip of dementia. And it's very possible that Barack Obama is still the president in a functional sense. And thus was not at all joking when he introduced Biden as the vice president.
And Vice President Kamala Harris?
Vice President Kamala Harris is an example of the identity politics that dominates the American public sphere today. She is only vice president because she is Black and female. And her qualifications are non-existent. It is increasingly clear from her moronic public statements that she is woefully ill-equipped even to be vice president, which is actually one of the easiest jobs in the world. The only duties of the vice president, according to the US Constitution, are to preside over the Senate, which most of them don't do anyway. They delegate to other people, and to wait in case the president dies. Otherwise, it's a purely ceremonial position. There is no responsibility attached. And yet she continually makes these ridiculous statements that make it clear that she's not, and she's way out of her depth. And so she's actually living testimony to the fact that it's a bad idea to choose people on the basis of their racial or sexual or any other characteristics. She should have been chosen, if she was going to be chosen at all, because she was competent and would be an effective administrator. But that's not how the Democrat Party operates today.
And now let's talk about my favorite personality, Mr. Trump, Mr. Donald Trump.
Donald Trump was an extraordinary president. He accomplished a great deal while he was president. The economy was booming. Gas prices were much lower than they are now. Inflation was under control. There was no invasion of Ukraine. Putin invaded Ukraine during the Obama administration and during the Biden administration, but he was notably quiet for 4 years. Trump was responsible for getting the NATO countries to be more involved in their own defense and not simply to depend upon the United States entirely. He achieved energy independence for the United States, which gave the United States considerable foreign policy leverage, where it had been dependent upon various oil-producing countries, and of course is again now. And Trump did a great deal more. He met with Narendra Modi and solidified the relationship between the United States and India, whereas previous administrations had been almost solely devoted to a relationship with Pakistan that has been completely self-defeating for the United States, with billions of dollars given to the Pakistani government to fight Al-Qaeda and the Taliban, and then the Pakistani government giving the money to Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. It's a ridiculous situation and it's ongoing. But Trump was not a member of the Washington establishment. There's a small oligarchy that rules the United States today. It's both Republicans and Democrats. George W. Bush was part of it. Barack Obama was part of it. Bill Clinton was part of it. Donald Trump was not part of it. And everything they could to destroy him, and they were able to succeed in getting him out of the Oval Office after one term. But now many Americans realize what's happening and have awakened up to it. And so the hegemony of this oligarchy may not last as long as they think.
That's what I wanted to. My next question would have been this only. How popular or unpopular is Biden's party and Biden's government?
Biden is extraordinarily unpopular.
These days.
Yes. All the polling shows that even solid members of the Democrat Party base don't like Biden. And it's very difficult to find someone. Only the most hardened ideologues, such as Hillary Clinton, say that Biden's doing a good job at this point. He's extremely unpopular. Kamala Harris is no more popular. And if the elections are free and fair, which is not at all a given, then the Democrat Party will suffer tremendous losses in 2022. But we'll see if that happens. It may be that they'll get tremendous gains, because we can't be sure now what's going to happen with the elections.
So you mean to say people are regretting voting for Democrats?
Oh, I think so, yes. Insofar as anyone actually did, rather than all the, and there is evidence that there was fraud in the 2020 election, but there were certainly people who did vote for Biden, but his approval ratings in the various polls are much lower than his vote total. And so even if you subtract the questionable votes, it's very clear that many people who voted for Biden are sorry now.
You know, America, USA stands for liberty, freedom of expression, freedom of speech, human rights. And, you know, when you think of all these things, you think of America. Like America leads the other democracies. But what happened to Mr. Donald Trump's freedom of expression and speech, that he was banned from all social medias?
Well, you know, this is one of the biggest problems in America today. And that is that these corporations, Twitter, Google, Facebook, the rest of them, they have an outsized power over the public sphere. They can control who has a voice and who does not. They've heavily shadow banned my website, Jihad Watch. And it's been very successful, so that the readership is much lower than it was just a few years ago. And it's not because of a lack of interest, it's because Facebook and Twitter and the rest of them have made it so difficult to find. And people tell me on Twitter, even though I am there tweeting every day news articles from Jihad Watch, they say, I haven't seen you tweeting
Yeah,
news.
even I'm not able to see them. Yeah,
exactly. So
now,
this
sorry, please continue.
They have more power over the public discourse today than any totalitarian regime ever did. The Soviet Union, Nazi Germany, Communist China, none of them have as much power over the ability of people to speak and disseminate ideas as Twitter and Facebook and Google and the rest. And so that was actually one of the biggest failings during Donald Trump's administration, that he didn't try to limit their power. And then they got him and banned him from being able to speak. And they've banned many other people who say things that they don't like, and they're still doing it. Yeah. And so if this power is not restrained, the freedom of speech will be dead. And people say, but you can't stop them. They're private companies. They're not the government. They are working hand in glove with the Democrat Party and the Biden administration to limit the speech of their opponents. And if this is not ended, this will be the end of America as a free society.
So now we've heard that the billionaire is a shareholder in Twitter. You think it's going to change it, or what effects are we going to see in the future?
Elon Musk is the largest shareholder in Twitter, but he only holds 9.2%. That's not really very much. If you make large changes in the organization. So I'm hoping that he'll be able to acquire more and strike back for the freedom of speech. He's a strong advocate of the freedom of speech. And so I don't see him allowing Twitter to go ahead this way. But right now he can be easily outvoted.
And how popular or unpopular Mr. Narendra Modi is in US?
Probably most people don't know anything about him at all, because the United States, I'm sorry to say, most people only care about the United States. You look at most
Yeah.
forces in the United States and it's all domestic. And there's hardly any foreign policy news, or it's non-existent or over on page 12 or something. It's just not there. So most people, most Americans, if you said, who is Narendra Modi? I'm sorry to say, I would expect most people would not even know.
No.
But those that do, it would line up pretty much the way it does between the Republicans and the Democrats.
Yeah.
And people who are aware of the jihad, aware of what the Islamic Republic of Pakistan is really all about, aware of the Palestinian jihad and that it's not a struggle for land and so on, they will support Mr. Modi, and others will not in the same way. There's been an insidious effort in American academia, as I'm sure you're aware,
Yeah.
to stigmatize and demonize Hindutva,
Yeah.
to claim that it's some kind of a threat.
Yeah.
Literally ironic, since these are the same people who ignore and deny the jihad threat, which is actually real. But that is going on, since the American universities are, to a great degree, controlled by money from Qatar, money from Saudi Arabia, and so on. This is why they do this.
Now, Ukraine and Russia, the whole saga. Why is America looking so confused and weak? Why?
That's Joe Biden's administration, confused and weak. You look at the man, he's confused and weak. And so Putin invaded because Biden is confused and weak. He knew that he could get away with it now in a way that he would not have been able to when Trump was president. It's because of America's weakness that this is all happening. And America's weakness is self-inflicted. America's wounds are self-inflicted. It's Biden who did it. We were energy independent and standing strong internationally, and he ruined both. And so it's all his responsibility. Or Obama, whoever's president, it's his responsibility.
Right. And this whole, again, Afghanistan and Biden's decisions is, why did he do what he did to Afghanistan?
Biden left Afghanistan after 20 years. It was a useless effort that was wrongly conceived from the start. And it was good to leave Afghanistan. Trump had announced he was going to leave Afghanistan, and he had set a deadline. And Biden didn't meet that, but he did get us out. All that's fine. The problem is that the American military had spent the summer of 2021 instituting leftist theories, leftist agenda into the US military. They spent the summer of 2021 imposing critical race theory, which is just race hatred and race mythology, in the American military, instead of devising a plan for leaving Afghanistan safely. And they spent the summer of 2021 investigating to find insurrectionists, so-called, in the US military, that is, supporters of Trump. And so if they hadn't been doing all this political nonsense, they might have planned the withdrawal from Afghanistan in a way that would have resulted in no loss of life. It really wouldn't have been difficult. If they had held on to Bagram Air Base and gotten everybody out that way, there wouldn't have been any rush at the Kabul airport. And there wouldn't have been any way for the Taliban to exploit the rush at Kabul airport, or for ISIS to explode the bomb there and kill so many people. If Bagram Air Base had not been abandoned in the dark of night by the US military, we could have gotten all the civilians out, including the people who were still trapped there first, and then gotten the military out and then abandoned the airbase. But they were too busy with their political agendas to do this. And this is the same kind of weakness and confusion that Putin saw, that he realized this is the time now to strike.
So when are we seeing you in India?
I would love to go there. That would be wonderful. I hope it happens. And I've never been invited. Anytime I'm invited, we'll undertake serious consideration, see if we can make it happen.
Hope to see you soon in India, especially Delhi.
I hope
Thank you
That
so
would
much,
be one.
Robert. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Robert. Bye-bye. Thank you.